Danny enters a bar and approaches Theo. He talks to her and buys her a drink. A couple approaches them, Carl and Daisy. Carl introduces Daisy to them. Danny and Theo are actually together and they are just role-playing. They dance, then have sex when they get home. Danny wakes up and eats pizza. He hears Carl playing a video game in their living room. Carl invites him to play. Danny says he has work the next day, but Carl convinces him to play. They are enjoying the game so much that they make loud noises. Theo tells them to keep their voices low. 11 years later, Gemma approaches Danny while he grills. She wishes him a happy birthday. Theo is busy in the kitchen. She hears the doorbell ring. It's Carl and they give each other hugs. Theo looks for Daisy, but Carl says he and Daisy are not together anymore. She lets him in and tells him that Danny is just outside. Carl approaches Danny and greets him. He gives him Striking Vipers X as a gift. Danny tells him it's nostalgic. He tells Carl he doesn't have VR, but Carl tells him he has actually bought him one. Carl and Danny catch up with life. Carl tells Danny that Theo is looking good and teasingly tells Danny he walks like an old man. Danny explains what happened to his knee and adds that it's fine because he's already married and teases Carl for being single. Carl shares with Danny that he is meeting Mariella after his party and shows a picture of her. That night, Theo suggests he should invite Carl over dinner so they can catch up with each other. He tells her Carl is busy, but Theo insists. Carl and Mariella are having dinner in a luxurious hotel and they later end up in bed, but Carl seems unsatisfied. Danny is playing Tetris. Carl suddenly invites him to play Striking Vipers X. He instructs Danny on how to set up the game. They choose their game characters. Carl chooses Roxette and Danny chooses Lance. They start the game and they both see themselves as the characters they chose. Danny can't believe how real the game feels. They start to fight. Roxette attacks Lance non-stop and they both can physically feel what happens in the game. When Roxette gets on top of Lance, they kiss each other until Lance stops and wants to end the game. Carl exits the game and so does Danny. They are both surprised about what happened. The next day, Danny is still thinking about what happened in the game and can't focus at work. One night, Theo leaves Danny and Tyler at home. Carl plays pinball, but he gets bored of it. Danny is playing Tetris when Carl invites him to play Striking Vipers X again. Danny tells him he can't play a long game and adds he was drunk the last time they played, so they agree to be serious in the game this time. They start and choose the same fighters. They are about to start fighting, but they kiss each other instead and have sex in the game. Lance sits down beside Roxette. Roxette tells Lance they are basically gays now because of what happened. Lance is speechless, so Roxette tells him it's a joke. Lance suddenly feels someone is kicking him, so he exits the game. It's his son Tyler. While in bed, Danny sends Carl a message to apologize for leaving the game. They both get addicted to the game, to the point where it has affected Theo and Danny's sex life, and Theo starts to get concerned about it. Carl and Danny are playing the game again as the same characters. Lance asks Roxette about the feeling of being inside a woman's body. She says it's crazy and it's satisfying, then they kiss. The next day, Theo texts Danny that she got a babysitter that night for Tyler. Danny gets confused, so he asks Theo why. Theo replies, "Wedding anniversary," and sarcastically thanks him for forgetting. Danny immediately lets Carl know that he can't play that night because it's his wedding anniversary. While Theo is waiting for Danny, a guy approaches her and asks if he can buy her a drink. She refuses and shows him her wedding ring. Danny arrives and Theo talks to him. She tells him her problem with Danny. The way Danny is physically there, but his mind is somewhere else. She asks him what's going on and Danny answers her that nothing is. Theo tells him they haven't had sex for weeks. Danny just tells her he's been tired and apologizes. Theo asks him if he is seeing someone else, but Danny answers no. Theo tells him that a guy tried hitting on her earlier and reveals she almost wanted him to, but she refused because she's still loyal to him and their family. Danny reassures her nothing is going on. Carl is having sex with Mariella, but he suddenly stops. Mariella asks if it's about work and he answers he thinks so. Carl gets online to play. Danny puts the VR inside a cabinet. Because Danny hasn't been accepting Carl's game invites, he texts him and asks where he is. Danny calls him to tell Carl he can't play anymore and that it is not fair to Theo. Carl says it is not considered cheating because it is not real. He tries to convince Danny to play less often instead, but Danny has already made up his mind and says goodbye. 7 months later, Theo is pregnant with their second child. She tells Danny she invited Carl for dinner. During dinner, while Theo gets the dessert, Carl tells Danny he tried to play with others but it's not the same. He invites Danny to play one last time at midnight. Later that night, Danny can't sleep because he's thinking of the game. He can't resist it, so he gets up to play with Carl. Roxette tells Lance she loves him and that she knows he's also feeling it. Lance asks her where it will end. Danny tells Carl to meet him at the back of the year club in 30 minutes, not to fight, but they will kiss, to know if they will feel something with each other. They meet and kiss, but they both say they didn't feel anything. But Carl added it's different in the game. Danny furiously disagrees and urges Carl to get the game out of his head. They argue and they start to fight each other. The police see them fighting. Theo bails Danny out. She asks what happened to them. Theo gets frustrated because Danny isn't answering her. Fast forward to Danny's next birthday. They celebrate it, much like his last birthday, and they have their second baby. Later that day, Theo gives Danny a gift. It's the device for playing Striking Vipers X. She tells him to return it to her the next morning. Danny also gives him a gift, a wedding ring box. Theo takes her wedding ring off every night to meet with other men, while Danny and Carl continue to play Striking Vipers X. If you enjoyed this video, please make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a new release. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.